Hi students, this is the variables practice video. After watching this, you should do the variables outline, drills, and debug drills activities. This video is just to help get you a better understanding of what variables are and the different types of variables and how to use them in Python when we're coding. Variables have a structure, and so it first starts with the name of the variable, and then we have an equal sign. This equal sign means set to. And then we have data. So when we have our variable, we have it set to some form of data. And there's different types of variables, and that depends on the data that we put in. But the names of the variables can vary. So it can be just a single letter is set to data, or it can be a string of letters is set to data. One thing to keep in mind is whenever you're naming your variables, you should be specific but also short. So if I want to name my variable, I can just put var because that's a shorter form of variable and I understand the meaning of it. If I have two variables that I want to name var, I can just put var1 and var2. I'm using what's called camel casing, and camel casing is where each word should start with a letter that's capitalized, except the first word. When using variable names, you should try to stay away from using numbers, because numbers can be confused with data, and whenever we're using letters, we usually referring to variables unless they're in quotation marks, which we'll talk about what that means later. So the different types of variables are integers, and then floats, and then we have string, and we have a boolean, and then we have a list. To start, we'll go with integers, and integers are numbers. So if I have a variable, we can set that to 12. I can also have the variable set to a long list of numbers. It's essentially any number that you can think of, you can set to an integer. Now, integers are whole numbers, and so when we talk about numbers with decimals, those are called floats. So we can have 1.2. We could also have 3.1. And so these can just keep going. Anything with a decimal is a float. A string is our words that we're using. It's a string of characters. These characters don't actually hold a value. If I were to take these floats or integers, they have a numeric value to them. But these strings are just characters. So I can set my variable to a string, and to signify that this is a string, I put it in quotation marks. I can put string in here. I can also put, words in here with a space, and it's still considered a character. This space here is a part of this string. I also can put numbers in there. So if I put a set to 12, it's holding this character value of 12, not the numeric value of 12. A boolean is a true or false statement. So I can set something to true. I can also set something to false. Something to keep in mind is you have to have a capital T or an F whenever you're dealing with booleans. If I set it to true, but I don't have a capital T, it's going to read this as another variable, because most of the time when we deal with text, it's dealing with other variables. So if I don't have a previous variable called true, it's not going to set A to anything. If I want this to be the Boolean true, I can type in true with a capital T. I can also put this in quotation marks, and now it's a string variable. Now this is a little confusing, and that's okay. One thing to keep in mind is whenever you're naming variables, keep them away from other forms of variables. So don't name a variable true and then set it to 1. Because anytime you call upon that true, it'll be confusing to differentiate between a Boolean and a variable. Now, a list, which I see I just spelled wrong, is a list of variables that you have. So if we can set A to a list, we do that by putting an open bracket, then putting our variables in there. The commas separate every single item in your list. If I get rid of a comma, this is now 34. By adding the comma, I separate these two. You also can have different types of lists with different types of variables. So I can set this to the string of yes, comma, and then the string for no. So now when I call upon this A, it'll give me the list of these two string values. Now, one thing to keep in mind is variables are case sensitive. So if I were to have a capital A is set to 1, this is set to 1, and then this A is set to yes, no in the list. So these are two separate variables right now. Every single variable I've used has been the letter A, and so that variable has been changing throughout my entire program. This is called top-down processing. And so if I were to print out A right now, it'll give me the list of yes and no. We have a couple errors here, so let me just delete them so we can run our code. Now this print A statement is going to print out our list yes and no. But what if I were just put this A halfway throughout our code? It'll print out two different values. One is 1.2 and one is yes and no. This is because the print A is set right after when A is set to 1.2. So it's going to print out what the most recent value for A is set to. Now going back to lists, we can do something that's cool by selecting specific parts of our list. So let's get rid of this yes no, because it's going to set this A to 3, 4, 5, and 6. If I want to call upon a specific position on this list, I put my variable and then I put a bracket here. And I can put 1. And it's going to call upon the 1 position in our list. Now you see it printed out 4. And that might be a little confusing because 4 might not be the first position in the list. But that's not necessarily what 1 means. The thing about a list is it sets everything from 0. So the 3 is going to be set on the 0. And then the 4 is going to be set on the 1 position, the 5 on the 2, and the 6 on the 3. So if I actually want to print out 3, or the first position, I should put 0. Because then it'll print that out. As you can see, it printed that out. If I want to call upon the last one, I can do -1. Because it goes -1 and it sees that there's no variable here, so it goes back and it'll print out 6. Now if I want to do a range of variables, I can put a colon and then the range it's going to. The thing about the range selector is it doesn't print out the last range. So if I put 3, it's going to print out 1 to 3, but it's not going to include 3. It's going to do 1, 2, and end at 3. So printing out 4 and 5, which are in the first, in this 1 position, and then this 2 position right here. If I want to print all of them up to 6, I can just put this up to 4 right here, which is going to go here, end at 4. It's going to print the 3. If I just want to print the rest in the statement, I can leave it open and it'll print 1 till the end of that list. Now you can also set variables to other variables. I can set the variable b to a1. And so this a1 variable is going to be 4. And so the b should be set to 4. If I print out B, I'll get 4 right here. Now this way of selecting a range in variables also works for strings too. So we can have the string of C set to string, and when I call upon that, I can print C open bracket, and I can have, let's just say 0. It's going to put the first character in the string, and it prints out S. I can do a range and set it to 4, and it's going to print out the range from 0 to 4. Now this print statement is very useful because it allows you to check what the variable is being set to. And so if you're ever confused, feel free to just run the print wherever you want right after that variable, and it should run what the variable is set to. I don't have to set it to a variable either. I can just say print 2, and it'll print me the numeric value of 2. I can say print hello, and it'll print me out that string value. I can do this with any type of variable. Now, when dealing with code, you'll get lots of errors. And these errors are split into 2 categories. The first one is syntax. The other is logic. A syntax error means that there's a problem with the syntax of the code. If we look at syntax grammatically, it's the arrangement of words and phrases to create sentences in language. And so since programming is still a language, we have to follow the proper syntax of that language. So in English, we might say, the dog is nice. In coding, we have the same structure. We have the variable, and then the equal sign, and then the data. So we have to follow a very specific structure. If you mess up the order, or put something or remove something, the sentence doesn't work. So if I put the dog nice is, this isn't grammatically correct. And for the same way, we can't put an equal sign after this data set because it's not proper syntax. And so that would be a syntax error. If we remove something, the dog nice, that's not grammatically correct. So if I remove this a variable, we're missing something crucial to this line of code here, and it doesn't work. Also, it happens when we add too many things. If I have 2 equal signs, it doesn't work here. So we have to follow the proper syntax when dealing with code. When you're dealing with logical errors, that means there's a problem with the program's logic. It's kind of like having a story that doesn't make sense. If I have groceries, and then the next moment I'm eating a steak, I might infer that I cooked the steak that was in the groceries. But since coding has to be extremely specific, I have to say that I bought a steak, and then I cooked the steak, and now I'm eating the steak. And so what this looks like in coding is if I have print var, yes, I might have the intention that var is set to the numeric value 1, but if I haven't clarified that, it's not going to actually print anything. It's just not going to work. So whenever you're dealing with code, you have to be very specific about what you're saying, otherwise there's a logic error. Other forms of logic errors is even trying to say, I set my variable to 2, and then just misspelling it. I can say variable, and it's not going to print that. Us as humans might say, oh, I understand this, but the computer's not able to, because variable is not defined. And so now you're going to apply this. To do this, you're going to go to the outline and follow the instructions here. Feel free to keep all this text. You're going to follow this as you do the activity, and then just submit that file when you're done. And now we're going to go to the drills. The drills is just really getting you comfortable in what coding is like and the different scenarios you might find in coding different variables. And then debug, we will give you situations like right here, and you're going to have to find out what the problem is. We can see the amount of errors here. This has 4 errors, and then this other one has 3, and then the last one also has 3. And so you're just going to fix those errors and then send it in. And feel free to run it and see what the computer tells you. This will give you practice in reading what the computer is telling you and understanding what you might need to fix. You'll be doing this a lot whenever you're coding. So this is a very, very good habit to establish. And once you have all of these done, then that means you have completed the variables module. If you have any questions, feel free to attend mine and Samantha's student hours. Otherwise, you can email either of us. And that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day.